So last week I shared with you a personal perspective on closure and healing after a relationship ended. So today we're doing something a little different. Today we're going to talk about both sides. I gave my perspective. Now you're going to get the perspective of
the infamous
ex. This conversation, though, it's not about opening any wounds. This conversation is about growth. It's about healing. It's about accountability, and helping other people that may be going through the same situation. So thank you all for being here. We're here to talk about what we learned and how we grew from that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start by simply asking you questions. When you think about our relationship now, what comes to mind?
It's a great question. I mean, obviously it's been years since we separated. But I think if I had to think of one operative term that I could use to truly describe where we're at right now in life is growth. I think it perfectly illustrates, all of the things that we've done to get to the point where we are now, where we can sit right here next to each other. Now, I'm pretty sure there's some other terms that I can extract from my brain, but growth without question.
Oh, you're choosing violence.
I'm not choosing
okay.
violence. I'm not choosing violence, but without question, growth. I don't think there's no better term to, without getting too deep to describe like where we are right now, without question.
Okay. How has your perspective changed over time? You chose violence by saying what you said just now. So expound upon that. And I have said that in my last video, I did say that it has taken years to get to this point. Because, of course, when we broke up, it didn't start out as this, but I honestly can say that we are friends.
Absolutely.
But it didn't happen overnight. It did not happen overnight. How has your perspective changed over time?
Well, I'll be quite honest with you, T. And I don't know, maybe I was oblivious, to how deeply wounded you were. I think you really did a really good job of, to some extent, masking that. Because I really was, in some ways, unaware. I think a lot of it number one, a lot of it really had to start with really just self-reflection on my part. Which, allowed me to really, really see things in the light of truth. That's the only way that you can get to a point where you really, really see things from a very, very clear perspective. And I had to really, really be honest with myself with a lot of things. That whole accountability word that a lot of people kind of gloss over. But I really, really, really had to deep dive into my own mental psyche and really, really, really have some really, really hard conversations about things that I did and then how that impacted you. And in doing so, it allowed me to shift my perspective and see things from, a much clearer perspective that I didn't, have at that time when things, parted ways. Because I'm not gonna lie, some of it was a blur. Some of it really, I hadn't really grasped what I had lost. A lot of it, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was just kind of going through the motions. But to answer your question, I had to really stop, look in the mirror, and really deep dive into, again, the things that I had done, what it caused, and again, it shifted my lenses in terms of, my perspective.
So last week I shared how the breakup impacted my mental health and identity, but viewers haven't heard your side. So, what was a time like for you emotionally?
You wanna know what's funny?
No, what?
No, it's crazy, man. Like, I definitely went through like, I felt like a character on Love Jones, and the reason why I say that, because I think of this. I'll be quite honest with you. There's this one song, and it's not necessarily indicative of anything you had done, but I think it illustrated the pain that I was going through at that time. And when I think, I take it back. It's not Love Jones. I want to say it was Love and Basketball. And for whatever reason, this particular song kept playing in my head over and over and over again. And it's the song that says, "You made a fool of me, tell me how." And again, it is not necessarily indicative of anything you had did, but I think the musicality of that song really spoke to how I was feeling. And to be quite honest with you, like, you kind of speak towards you kind of losing your identity, and I felt the same way, because here it is, my identity has been associated with this person for years, damn near a decade. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the viewers know this or not, but I mean, you were one of the first, you were the first individuals that I met when I first moved here, and so there's that portion of our relationship, and then I think additionally to that, and I don't know, and I know I may be going somewhere with this, but I don't know how it impacted the family aspect of it. You know what I mean? Because that was very difficult for me. Your parents and your family has always been an extension of my biological family.
I hadn't gone into you the person, but just so you will know, he is ex-military, retired military. Mm-hmm. And so when he says he first came to Virginia, you all know that I'm in Virginia. And so that's what he's referring to. My family embraced him, basically.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so it was literally two proverbial deaths at that moment. Obviously, losing someone that, again, I've been with for an exorbitant amount of time, and then losing what which was an extension of my family on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it was you talking about, again, losing an identity, that was definitely jarring. But to have that family away from family, man, that meant a lot. So yeah, it was definitely two proverbial funerals that I had to experience.
And that's what I talked about in my last video, that people don't understand that research does show that when you do break up with someone, or something like that ends like that, it is like a death. You grieve that relationship, that person leaving your life, and you can equate the two, and it's hard. Mentally, it's hard. Yeah, so that's interesting that you would say grieve.
Yeah. I mean, again, there was definitely a period where, I definitely didn't know which way is up. I mean, again, when you share, I mean, here's the thing, we didn't get to the point of ascension to that of marriage, but it did in a way, because of the lengthy period of time that we were together. Mm-hmm. Felt somewhat of like a divorce. I imagine that's what it feels like to go through a divorce. You know what I'm saying? You know, again, you know, you become so ingratiated with one another. And, you know, to not have that, to have that void. I never forget, I think it was probably the first time, you know, when I moved out. And I think you came over to my house one day. And, you know, and I think it was, I never forget it because I think we were really, really trying to navigate this new feeling of what it was like. And I think it was you, me, Snoopy, and we were all laying in my bed. And I was like, wow, man, like this is crazy, like how different this is going to be, you know, for us. And it was just one of those jarring memories that I'm able to kind of extract and just kind of remember like what it felt like at that moment. Like, man, this is the new reality that you know that we're going to have to kind of shift towards. So yeah, you know. But I'm gonna be honest with you, T. Like, and I've said this before, like I never realized the mental and psychological ramifications that you had to endure, you know, when all of that, you know, when it actually, you know, came to a point where we pivoted. Like, I would say some of it I was a little oblivious to, you know, in like conversations that we had. Like, I had no idea that you really, really dealt with that.
So, and I have shared with this channel that I have grown up like that, and I don't share my feelings. I do a lot of stuff behind closed doors because I don't want people to see that weak side of me, or what I would say is weak, which is really not. Showing emotions and feelings, that's not weak, and we need to stop saying that it is. Yeah, I didn't want anybody to see me like that. So I did hide a lot.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's why you haven't seen that or didn't see that. What do you wish you understood back then that you understand now?
As far as?
So it's not just about the person who was hurt. I recognize that in my growth journey. Mm-hmm. I recognize that after the breakup, you also dealt with your own stuff. And I'm not, blind. You are a person and with feelings also.
Here's the crazy thing, see. I saw this on it was a reel that I saw. And God, I wish I would have written this down. Because he was very, very eloquent in terms of, how he conveyed this message. But I'm gonna paraphrase it. He essentially said that had he had the level of self-control that he had in his present day, he can only imagine where his life would have been or what would have came out of it. Mm. And, I look at my life sometimes and, and of course I'm looking at it, through the lens of, where I am now as a man and, the things that that I've been able to extract through, the good and the bad lessons. And it's kind of hard for me to answer that question because I don't know if I would be the version of the person that I am today had I not gone through those experiences. Mm-hmm. Like I needed to go through that, and some of it I wish I didn't. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us hindsight 20 would say, "Hey, man, I wish I knew." You hear it all the time. I wish I knew some of the things that I knew now back then, but I don't think that I would have had this level of ascension, or seeing life through the way that I see it now had I known those things. What I will definitely say is I probably would have done a lot of things differently. And I don't know if we would be sitting here next to each other had I known some of the things that I known then, because I would have probably been a little bit more honest about where I was at in our life. I mean, you gotta think, see, again, we were young. There was a part of me that wanted to live the life that I chose at that time. Me knowing what I know now, I would have been honest with you and say, "Hey, T, listen, this is what I want to do right now." And I think that would have saved us a lot of heartache and pain. I think I mentioned to this before, and this is one of the things that kind of really bothers me. And the thing that bothers me, one of the things that bothers me the most when I think about all of the nefarious and egregious things that I did, not only did it impact your life, but I think about, man, where would your life have been? You could have been married, have kids. I think a lot of my shit, excuse my language, probably derailed, where your life could have possibly went. And I take a lot of, I hold a lot of umbrage when it comes down to that. You know what I mean? Just looking, when I had to sit down with that, like, man, your decisions probably cost somebody their own life in terms of what they wanted to get out of it. So yeah, that's one of the things that I definitely think about for sure.
And you brought it up, but no, so that is something that I think about not as often as I used to, because I've shared with you my fertility journey, I'm not capable of having children. Of course, I'm a woman of a particular age now, but as Wendy Williams would say. But yeah, I spent all of my 20s with you.
Yeah.
Though that's the prime time.
Prime time.
And so yes, I did behind closed doors, of course, because I've never blamed you. I've never taken out anger on you, but behind closed doors, absolutely. I've said some things about you because I felt that I was angry when it all was said and done and I was told you can't produce anymore. I was upset with you. But again, like mentally, I'm saying all this to say mentally, I had to deal with a lot, but I'm at a place now where I fully believe all things happen for a reason.
Absolutely.
And this is a part of God's plan. I don't know what that plan is, but I'm here for the ride because my life is not my own. And I know that. And so here we are. And so
I totally agree with you 1,000%. I think what I would caveat that with is, it's funny that I've had this conversation. So, and really, when I was actually on my way over here, I was talking to a friend of mine. And I think this is one of those things that, again, that really, really gets glossed over, is that our lives daily, and I'm talking about from the moment we wake up, is a bevy of choices. And the byproduct of our lives is all contingent on the choices that we make. And that's why I say, for me, it's, listening to what you just said, it's so unsettling for me, because I made choices that impacted not only myself and what we had, but it affected, again, the trajectory in your life and where it could have went. You know what I'm saying? And kind of going back to the original question that you asked me, man. That's just all a part of the growth, man. And being able to look back and see that, and not again, not making it about myself, knowing that I had another breathing entity next to me who was affected by my decision making. Now I want to clarify something, because I always, and this is something that I always tell people. And I've had conversations about our relationship, but, you and me, I always say this, I'm not a bad person. You know what I'm saying? I wholeheartedly know this. And I don't think I would be sitting here with you if you really genuinely thought that way.
correct.
But I am definitely flawed in the sense that I allowed my vice to disrupt something that we had. And I think there's a clear distinction there. Listen, we're all flawed, but that doesn't necessarily constitute us being bad people. You know what I mean? That's just one of the particular flaw that I had at that particular time in my life. You know, I chose to feed into that as opposed to exhibiting self-control, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to, you know, just simply making a choice of saying no. And again, it cost me a lot more than I wanted it to, but, you know, yeah, you know, again, not to, you know, go too far left, but that's believe it or not, T, I always, you know, I deal with my own stuff, but I also realize, you know, again, in the grand scheme of things, that somebody else was impacted by, you know, my lack of being what I needed to be at that particular time.
One thing I did talk about last week was how I believed an apology would have given me closure. And when I got it, it didn't. So you apologized right after it happened, but you.
It's been so long.
So you about to make me say something? You did. Of course you did.
Yeah.
You apologized right after it happened, and then you have since been apologizing. I mean, you have apologized since then. But it didn't make me feel any better because it didn't take away the pain. It didn't do anything for my healing.
Right.
Because they were just words. I do appreciate the acknowledgement, but again, the apology does not heal. And I say all this to say, I was talking about closure, period, and how, you know, you don't get closure from an apology. You get closure from the things we do to heal, and that is, you know, taking it to God. I did a lot of prayer. Did a lot of praying.
Sure you did.
I did a lot of writing. You know, I love to. You know, I love to write, and just dealing with my own stuff. And so, my question to you is, from your perspective, what did apologizing feel like for you?
So what did apologizing do? What did it do for me?
Yeah, what did it feel like for you?
Oh man, relinquishment. You know, I mean, apologies are obviously two-part. You know, it's you know the rendering of the actual word, and you know, which for a lot of people, believe it or not, is Jesus Christ. It's probably one of the hardest things. You'll be amazed at how many people in the world don't know how to do something as simple as an apology.
Oh, I've met a few people.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's. I mean, that's definitely a conversation for another day. But it starts there. It starts with, you know what I'm saying, acknowledging a wrong that was rendered, and doing it, and then, you know, and then acknowledging that, and then doing it contritely. And I understood that I needed to do that. You know, because again, it was a lot of things were done. So I knew that, you know, once the dust settled, realizing that, you know, again, I'd done some things that, you know, affected you negatively, things that you didn't deserve. I knew that, you know, again, the first portion of that was, you know what I'm saying, to contritely, you know, apologize to you and let you know that, you know, for one, I was sorry. And then number two, that, you know what I'm saying, I observe and understand that the hurt that it caused you. And then the second part of that is, you know, the actions. And, you know, listen, it didn't necessarily just, you know, even though I had recognized some of the things that I had done, it didn't necessarily end there. It wasn't like I came to this miraculous, you know, point in my life where I'm like, you know what I'm saying, you know, I figured it out, all is well, I'm gonna do this, that, and the third. Like, I still made some mistakes along the way, along my journey. But as far as you and I was concerned, like I really felt like it was important for me to, let you know that, I understand what I did and I observed what it did to you, and I felt like you were more than deserving for that.
Do you think that apologize, and this is outside of our relationships, in general, do you think that apologizing to someone will bring someone closure? Because I know I gave my opinion on it, so how do you feel about that?
Yes and no. And again, this is a cliche saying, but apologies isn't necessarily for the individual that you're giving it to. A lot of the time it's for you. But I mean, it's hard to say. I think it's a start. You know what I mean? But as you mentioned before, and I imagine a lot of other people who have dealt with certain things in egregious nature, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think understanding the how and the whys, I definitely think helps aid in getting to a better place. And the reason why I say that, and I've told you this before, and again, we're talking about, cheating, infidelity, and things of that nature. But I've told you this before, in the conversation. That particular act, because listen, that was pretty much the crux of why our relationship dissolved. I think had those things not that particular thing had not have happened, I don't know, we might have had a different outcome. I think it's fair to say that, because it wasn't like you and I had a bad relationship. It wasn't like we didn't get along in certain aspects, even though we were young. I think we would have had the capacity to grow. But when you have, again, something of that magnitude that fractures the relationship, the relationship in the way it does, it's kind of hard to bounce back from that. So again, you have that aspect. But going back to what I said originally, I think the understanding the why, and I had to learn that myself, that a lot of my behavior, and I told you before, it didn't have anything to do with you. It had everything to do with my own inadequacies. And that stems from a lot of different things that I dealt with. And I don't like to make this an excuse, because a lot of people do. But I think it's important to understand the hows and the whys. And I'm not using that as a crutch to say that it gave validity to what I did. But it definitely helps, again, understand, the reason behind the behavior. And, again, I think you understanding that, for me, can help aid in the healing. Now, obviously, there's your own journey that you have to take, but understanding that, okay, this guy did a lot of this stuff, but it didn't necessarily have to do anything with him. He was dealing with his own demons, and unfortunately, you just happened to be in the path of the storm. So I think it's two parts.
What would you say to someone who has hurt someone? What advice would you give?
Man, you just gotta be honest with yourself, man. I think a lot of people are just kind of going through the motions and really not doing the work. A lot of behavior, as I just mentioned, stems from a lot of different things. And so you have to look at that proverbial mirror and just really be honest with where you're at. You know what I mean? Because the reality is you have some people out here that will meet you where you stand. If you want to go out here and be a whoremonger and, enjoy life in that capacity, there are people out here that will be willing to do that. Trust me, I know this to be a fact. Not necessarily for somebody I dealt with, but anecdotally and, just conversations I've had with people. But I think it's, again, just being honest, man. Doing some self-assessment, doing some introspectiveness, and really, understanding where you're at in your life and what you really want. I think that, God, my God, it would help avoid so much heartache and pain. Going back to when we originally met and through the process, man, see, I didn't do none of this stuff, man. You know what I mean? Like, This is, those things that we've experienced, allow me to get to this place where I see it from that perspective, and many other things that I've experienced afterwards allow me to see things through the lens that I see now. But like I told you, you don't get this version of Jay had I not gone through that. Like you really don't. You know, I've had this knack of touching the stove, man.
You're welcome. Okay, so breakups, they change both people, even if the growth looks very different. So, how did this relationship change you as a man?
Our relationship?
Or any relationship. But particularly since we're here with me.
You know, again, as I mentioned before, I think the only thing I know, you know, it really allowed me to really deep dive into, you know, the person that I wanted to be. And then I'll be honest with you, see, it took me a while, you know, to really get to that point. And the reason why I say that was because, if I'm being honest, I don't think, even after our tenure, I ended up dating someone else. I don't think I really gave myself the necessary time that I needed to really do the level of self-reflection that I needed. I think you really, really, truly have to sit with yourself and really, really, you know, exclude yourself from different situations. It requires that, man. Like, it really, really requires that you really, truly, honest sit down with yourself. And so, you know, looking back at that, you know, and again, extracting, you know, some of the positives and the negatives, I realized that, you know what, I really need to sit down with myself. And some really great things came out of it. I kind of did some of the same things you did. Like, I really got into like writing and expressing myself and being very, very open about my shortcomings. Like, I'm very, very, I think one of the big misconceptions, you know, I'm not one of them type of people that hides my flaws because it humanizes us. I hate when people walk around and, you know, saying, try to gloss over the fact, perpetuate this narrative that they have this halo over their head.
Perfect, yeah.
And it's not that. Like, I like for people to see my flaws because it gives a glimpse of my trajectory as a man. And, you know, going back to what I said, like, every day is a choice. And I try to do the best with the 24 hours that I get and make the right choices. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I'm able to pull from those particular chapters in life. And it helps me to pivot, you know, sometimes when I see certain obstructions or certain temptations. And helps me to, you know, quell that vice. Because listen, man, you know, really what it boils down to is just, you know, I'm going to always have an insatiable desire for a woman.
Okay.
I'm not talking about in that capacity. I'm just saying, like, you know, I understand.
You love the lady.
I understand that God had created ladies, or I would say singularly, a woman for us. You know what I mean? You know, that type of lifestyle has a very, very short ceiling. So yeah, you know, I as much as it was detrimental in his own way, I'm just glad that I'm have the presence of mind. And this is one of the things that I always think about. It's a beautiful thing to be in this space that we have, that God has bestowed upon us, the mental capacity to be able to distinguish our right from our wrong, as opposed to having the reprobate mind and continue to do nefarious acts. Like, that's a really, really, really good space to be in, man, where your decisions, be it good or bad, have an effect on you. And so I'm you know, again, pulling back from those things. Yeah, I'm glad to be in a space where I understand without question my decisions and how they impact things. And it took some more failures to understand that.
What did you learn about emotional maturity?
A lot of people don't know what that means. And I don't really truly think people understand what that means. Emotional maturity, you know, being able to self-regulate, all of those things work hand in hand. Having a pulse on, you know, the things that you do, the things that you say. because those things, hold weight. They have consequences, be it good or bad. But to be quite honest with you, and I say this right. I've always had a level of emotional maturity. Like I've always been a type of person, hear me out, that had, that maybe not understanding what it meant then, but I've definitely understanding it a lot now in terms of just, again, knowing how to insert myself in certain situations, knowing when not to insert myself in certain situations, knowing that not every battle is meant to be won. Sometimes it's just a matter of understanding the situation. And so I've gotten a better understanding of that as I've gotten older. And I can honestly say that's something that I feel like more now than probably did I exhibit.
All right, so one of the biggest things about healing is forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, what did it feel like when we reached the place of forgiveness and friendship?
Man, it was everything. Especially knowing what you did to knowing what you did to a person, and to know that knowing the work that the individual had to go through in order to get to that place. It was everything. I really wasn't honestly sure that we would ever get to the place that we're in right now. You had every right to feel the way that you felt. And again, as I mentioned before, like I didn't realize, how deep into that proverbial hole that you were in. Like I was totally oblivious to that. So, I think it speaks volumes to the work that you did. Because unfortunately you were the byproduct of some of the, more nefarious decisions that I was making. But to know that you were able to come out of that place, and I would think more importantly, like really see me for who I was, and just recognize that I was just a man with flaws. It meant a lot, and then more importantly, like what came out of that. The fact that here we are sitting in your living room, being able to have these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, man, But I think I have to point out one thing though, like I might have forgotten. And that's that, one of the, I would say a more important piece is one of the major players that really helped bridge that gap was this fella right here. I don't know, again, I think things would have been a little bit different because he really was the fusible link that really kept us together, or allow us to be able to interact with each other, long after things, ties were severed. And so, and whenever I have conversations, because I've had conversations about you and I, this never gets lost on me, and that's why, he means so much to me, because I think we mentioned this before. I don't know if we get to that place if it had not been for him.
Right.
Because we didn't have, when we broke up, there was no reason for us to talk.
Correct.
Other than the fact, again, I had and still have a really close relationship with your family. But even after that, like there was, considering what happened, there was no reason for us to talk. There was no reason for us to continue to be friends.
Right.
But we had a common interest with Snoopy. And, I'm thankful that he lived long enough to help us mend those wounds. Because I don't think we get to this place without him.
True story. What did forgiveness teach you, if anything?
Man, I mean, I always say, like, I always say this one about me personally. Forgiveness takes a whole new meaning when you're on the other end of it, needing to be forgiven. Because a lot of people don't look at it through that, proverbial lens. They don't look at it, they don't see themselves being on the opposite end of that. Sometimes we find ourselves in precarious situations where we're needing someone else's forgiveness. And so for me, it taught me to be able to dissect things and look at things from a very mature lens. I recognize that, man, we're all fallible. We all make mistakes now. Some more egregious than others. Some things are a little bit easier to forgive than others. But, again, we all find ourselves on the other end of that. And I think we want people to render the same level of love, compassion, in the word that we operatively use so much nowadays, grace.
What does closure mean to you today?
I think I could look at it from two perspectives. It can mean a couple of things. It can mean a finite ending between you and that individual, right? Where you both go your separate ways, or it can be a means to a new chapter, and I think that's what you and I are in currently. Obviously, we've had a finite ending to our relationship, but what blossomed out of that is a friendship that we were able to cultivate in time. Obviously, doing a lot of internal work, and so again, I think dependent upon the individual, it can mean a multitude of things. But again, obviously in the case of us, we've closed one chapter and opened another one. So.
And do you think that closure comes from the other person or within?
It can be both. I'll make this personal. Like I tried to seek closure in an endeavor. Didn't necessarily get that. I would say not in the way that I imagined that I would. But nevertheless, I got what I felt was the necessary closure that was needed. You know what I mean? So it can be internal, or it can't be. It just really depends. I mean, all that it all depends on what you're trying to get out of it. What are you trying to extract out of it? I think when people kind of get to a point where they're seeking that, they've already done the work, the self-reflection, and the introspection to the degree where they're able to have that conversation with that person, and regardless of what the outcome is, they're willing to accept, whatever comes out of that.
What advice would you give someone stuck waiting for closure?
Don't.
That's my advice too. Don't.
But I think, definitely don't. Time is not this labyrinth of resources. It's not. It's not. And so I think it is advantageous and incumbent upon that individual to, again, make sure they know what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
Do the work for yourself, and then just have the courage, again, to, ask the questions, go into it with an open mind, and not necessarily be fixated on a specific outcome, because, again, depending on the circumstances, that can go one or two ways. I think you and I have been very fortunate, again, where, we've been able to get that and something good come out of it, whereas in most situations it's not that. It's this abrupt ending, kiss my butt, God bless you, and take it easy. So I just think you just have to have a really, really mature mindset going into it, knowing that it can go both ways, but understanding that it helps alleviate the potential hurt of an outcome that is undesirable.
But my thing too with closure is, what if you never get that apology or anything like that? What if that never comes? You're going to be stuck waiting for that closure forever. So you need to figure it out. You need to find other ways to be okay.
I agree, but I mean, an answer or no answer is closure. You know what I mean? Like it could be either or. You know what I mean? Somebody acting negative towards something that you're trying to do positively is closure. You know, obviously we want a positive outcome, but if someone was to act a certain way towards you in a way that obviously isn't what you originally had planned, in your head in the most ideal fashion, that is closure. You know what I mean? Like, because again, in order to get to that place, as I mentioned before, not to be redundant, you have to get to a place where you're ready to have that conversation. You have had to have done some level of work to be able to come to, that proverbial fork in the road, knowing that it can go either way. And again, I think, understanding that, that again, this could be a happy ending where we can be friends and, again, close the chapter only to involve in something different, something potentially better. Or it could be, again, I don't want anything to do with you, but that is closure. I think you can accept one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so people think it's strange that we're friends.
I'm sure.
Okay, so why do you think we were able to reach this place
Why?
of peace?
I think the main catalyst for that is just maturity. You don't reach this having a certain level of maturity and the capacity to want to do so. And then I think it starts and ends with that. And then I always told you, man, like one of the, again, I can't negate the fact that man, said he plays such a pivotal part, and then that's being able to bridge that gap. So I think that, and I think there was a willingness to want to do so. I don't think, even with everything that's been said and done, I don't think we ever looked at each other as just being bad individuals. I think as time went on, I didn't look at it through that lens. I just realized that we were just two flawed individuals whose lives intersected at a time where there was a tremendous amount of growth that was void. And so for us to be at this place now, I think, again, the level of maturity that we've had, the level of work that we've poured into ourselves, obviously has translated in a way where we can sit, in the same space and not necessarily want to throw up at each other. But people have found this to be weird. And I've never been the type of person to subscribe to societal norms. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people allow social media to dictate how they do things. I'm like, listen, man, it can be done. It's not like you and I, we cross boundaries. We have a tremendous amount of respect for one another, and we understand where those proverbial boundaries are, and we keep it that way.
That was my next question. What do you think, what boundaries made friendship possible?
You said what boundaries make friendship possible?
Yeah.
Man, that's an honest, open and honest dialogue that you have to have. And again, I'm going to throw this word out a lot. I just think it's just a level of maturity that you have to have. It can exist. Two people can coexist. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it's a little bit easier to do this because I can't speak for you. I'm not in a relationship, right? So it's easy for us. It's easy for me to navigate this. Now, does it become a little bit tricky when you are in a relationship? Yes. I think it takes an immense amount of maturity for your partner to see that obviously nothing's there. There has to be some level of transparency. But I would say something else that I would add to that. I've always been of the mindset that, listen, at the end of the day, we've gotten to a point where we've cultivated a friendship, right? But there may be a time where, you may find someone if you haven't already. And I've always been of the mindset that I have no problem taking a back seat out of respect for you and your partner. Because I can understand that some people can look at this and probably feel some sort of way or feel intimidated, you know what I mean? But I think if you just be very, very transparent, understand that, there are things that shouldn't be allowed, in this kind of unique situation. Like, I'm not calling you, at all times of night. I'm not coming over to your house and all that crazy stuff. So I think, again, it's easy to, navigate this lane currently. And I imagine, like I said, whenever that day comes and our lives change, that will be a conversation that we have. But I'm respectful enough to know that I'm going to respect you and respect your situation.
What would you tell people who believe exes can never be friends? Or never be at peace, I should say.
Never be at peace?
Yeah.
And what do you mean?
So I just saying this, I am not advocating for anyone to be friends with their ex. To each his own. It's just something that works for the both of us.
Right.
But it can be done. But again, that goes with he's done the work, I've done the work, and
right.
we are able to
coexist.
We're able to because I don't want to say forgive and forget, but just move past what happened.
Right, amicably, absolutely.
Right. So, what would you tell people who believe that exes can never be friends and at peace with whatever transpired between the two?
Again, I think you define things for yourself. Like as I've gotten older, I've realized that a lot of people live in this construct, and it's almost like they're in the Matrix, and they subscribe to all of these different things, and they do what they're told, and it has to be like this, and it should be like this, and I don't believe that. You know what I mean? Like it's you define it for yourself. Yeah. And my thing is that again. It obviously it takes two people, right? It takes a mature adult, and it takes another mature adult, right, to understand the dynamics of what that situation entails. And again, it's a little nuanced because again, when you add another entity, or i.e., somebody that you're a partner with, that can get a little tricky because not everybody obviously sees life through the lens in which you and I see it. And again, there is respect to be had there, but. I say all that to say, man, it can be done. You know what I mean? You just have to have the right mental tools to be able to do it. And even if not, if like I said, this doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay too. I think as long as there is a level of peace and understanding that is left, that hey, we've come to a place where of healing, where we understand it's not like we're glossing over what was, but we've done the work, we've made amends, and now we're at a place where again we've closed that proverbial chapter in our lives, which was TJ Infinity.
Lord have mercy.
Right, and now we've charted
Wow.
And we've charted a new path. But I'll be, T, I'm gonna be honest with you, and I've said this before. And this is not a slight to what we had, because I think it was its own thing in its own right. But I love this version of what we have because we are a lot different than that green-eyed boy. We're a lot. We're it pales in comparison.
Agreed. Agreed. I want to end this episode speaking directly to people watching who are hurting right now. What would you say to someone who knows they messed up in a relationship and carries regret?
Again, define it for yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean, that the way it ended has to be the way it ends. If it meant something to you, if that person means something to you, again, the work starts with self. you take that energy, find that individual that you may have, hurt in some form or fashion, and, do, what you feel, is right in your heart, to make that situation what you want it to be. And hopefully it turns out that way. But do it with the mindset of knowing that, that the outcome can be either or. And be at peace with that. Be at peace with that outcome. Because I think most people, most mature adults can accept someone who has obviously shown some level of contrition followed by actions, right? Because words is just one component. I think the actions, obviously without question speak louder and has to follow, as the old cliche goes. And I think that's one of the reasons like why you and I can sit here. I think I've demonstrated that to you. I don't think you would be here if it wasn't. And like I mentioned before, I think we've both seen the growth in one another, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think what you're seeing is a byproduct of that. When you do the work, it can happen. Stop letting the world tell you what can and can't happen. If it means something to you, it can, and it will. Just gotta know that there's a tremendous amount of work that has to go into that.
So on the flip side of that, what would you say to someone who was betrayed and who feels stuck?
Again, you have to do the work. You have to, you have to look within yourself, man, and figure out that path. And I'll tell you what, man, it's a very liberating thing. It's a very liberating thing to be able to get to a space where you can say you heal, you heal from something. Mm-hmm. I think it's extremely detrimental to stay in that space. You know what I mean? Because you'll always be anchored. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I think allowing yourself to navigate those feelings, navigate those emotions, process it, and then come to a place of healing and forgiveness. I think that's just such a powerful tool that is so underutilized. I don't think people realize that. There's a lot of people that I've forgiven for things, and it's very liberating. And so that would be my suggestion to them. Find that place, do the work, and you'll be amazed what comes out of that.
Very good. Do you have you're so stupid. Do you have anything else you want to add to the conversation? Anything?
No. I don't know. Like I said, this has been crazy thing about like talking to we've had extensive conversations. To be able to talk about it is liberating in itself. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's embarrassing, but I always say like to look back at some of the things you've done in life, especially the things that you're not so proud of, and to cringe at those things is a good place to be in, because that demonstrates growth. Mm-hmm. That demonstrates contrition. Those things should bother you. Mm-hmm. But don't be anchored to those things. You know what I mean? As long as you have I always have this saying, as long as you have the capacity to learn, the willingness to learn, you will always have the capacity to be taught. And that's a mindset that I always take with me. I'm always looking to be the better version of myself. And I don't always get it right. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But that's the beauty of life. That's the beauty of life, man.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? To go through those hurdles. Whenever I make mistakes, I don't, I process it, I translate it. I don't stay there. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say to give yourself license to do the same thing over and over again. But, give yourself some grace, man. The objective is to finish the race, not get there the fastest.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That part.
That part, yeah. Well, J Smooth.
I still have that moniker, by the way.
I'm sure you do. thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Much
I
needed.
know it wasn't easy
No,
at
it was
times.
not. No, it was not.
But the reason why I do this channel is because I've gone through a lot of stuff and I've made a lot of mistakes. And I do share a lot of myself, but like I tell a lot of people, if what I've gone through can help someone else in their journey, and plus to let them know that they're not alone,
Absolutely.
I don't mind sharing my truth. I don't mind sharing the embarrassing parts of me. There are some things I will take to my grave, though, and nobody knows. Literally nobody knows about some stuff.
Rough.
However, the parts of myself that I will share.
Listen, there's power in self-deprecation, man.
Yeah, I don't mind doing it because
Absolutely.
there are a lot of people walking around aimlessly, making dumb decisions and not seeing their worth, not knowing their worth, and it's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking to see people not be who God wants them to be.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I share what I share. So thank you for having this conversation with me. You are going to participate in a couple of more conversations throughout this month.
Absolutely.
This month is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Absolutely.
And so, being that we have that common bond, being in a relationship that took us through some mental challenges on both sides, because like I closed Sunday on my video, that even though I got hurt, you still went through your own battle.
Absolutely.
It's not just about the person that got hurt. You also are human and went through emotional tolls yourself. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you can't forget about that. Even though some men or women try to act like, oh, I don't care what I did to him or her or whatever. No, you care.
That's a farce.
It is, but you know we'll touch on some of that too. But this conversation is just getting started. So if this video spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with somebody that needs to hear this, because it could be somebody on my side, Team Toya, anyway, or on the person that, you know, did the do.
The bad boyfriend.
You said it, I didn't. But I just want to end this. Again, thank you for speaking, and we will have more of him the rest of this month. But I just wanted to close out by saying what I always say to you. You were given this life because you were strong enough to live it. I will see you all in the next video. I love you, I love you, I love you. Bye for now.